Hi everyone, you're listening to Guts and Girl Bits. I'm Alison Mitchell, a practicing naturopath, and I hope to share with you all sorts of information about women's health and digestive health to educate and empower you to make informed choices about your own health. Please remember that all information is general and does not replace consulting with a healthcare practitioner. You're listening to Guts and Girl Bits. Today, I'm joined with Renae Bartlett, who is a clinical nutritionist who until 12 months ago was based in Adelaide, South Australia. She's currently residing in Canada for the next 2 years with her husband, 1-year-old daughter, and their dog Diego. Renae assists people by focusing heavily on the fundamental basics of using food first for healing, health, and well-being. Renae was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2016 and postpartum thyroiditis following the birth of their daughter in 2018. This has led Renae down a path focused on helping women who may have been diagnosed with postpartum thyroiditis or who are at risk of developing this condition. So thank you so much for joining me, Renae.
Thanks, Alison. I'm really glad to be able to speak with you today on your podcast.
Yay! So let's start with some basics. So what's the thyroid gland responsible for in the body?
So it's a very important organ that's part of the body. So it's part of the endocrine system, and its role is centered around producing the hormones that control the metabolism of all of our cells. So to put that in simpler terms, so some of the body functions that it's involved in is breathing, regulating our heart rate, regulating body weight and body temperature, menstrual cycles, brain function, mood, just to name a few. So a very, very important organ that's part of our body.
Yeah, it's so important. It does so much.
Yes, a lot.
All right, and then let's talk about what is postpartum thyroiditis.
So postpartum thyroiditis, if we look at the two terms separately, so thyroiditis means an inflammation of the thyroid and postpartum being post-pregnancy. So essentially it is a inflammation of the thyroid as a result of having a baby, and it causes both hyperthyroidism, so overactive, and hypothyroidism, so an underactive thyroid, with hyperthyroidism happening first in that instance. So the main difference between postpartum thyroiditis and, say, other inflammation conditions of the thyroid is that it's that pregnancy that really triggers it.
Okay. And how common is it?
So it's believed that it's between 5 to 10% of all pregnant women will be diagnosed with this condition. But a point to note is it's often misdiagnosed, and the reason for this is the symptoms can be very similar to those that a woman may experience just by virtue of having a baby. So, for example, you know, the things such as being fatigued, losing hair, insomnia, weight fluctuations can easily be attributed to just having a baby when in fact it may actually be postpartum thyroiditis.
Yeah. So many of those things people would just get dismissed about, like it's just because you're a mum or something along those lines, but it could be so much more.
Absolutely. And postnatal depression is also something that can be closely linked to postpartum thyroiditis. So it may in fact be the thyroid that's causing the depression state rather than depression as an isolated incident. So even though it's 5 to 10%, it may actually be more than that.
For sure.
Yeah.
And how do you go about getting it tested?
So it's simply a blood test after having a baby. Important to note that symptoms generally won't start until about 6 weeks after having a baby. So it's probably important to speak to your clinician about the independent factors that may require the blood test at certain times, but generally recommendation would be around about that 2-month period postpartum and then monitoring after that.
So if, say, a woman has been feeling okay for the early stages of the postpartum period and then she starts to feel a bit more downhill, is that where you'd be thinking maybe it's the thyroid connection?
It could very well be, and it's just simply a blood test. There's nothing terribly invasive about really seeing whether someone may have a thyroid condition after having a baby, and it can simply confirm whether that is something that needs to be further looked at and treated, or it can then be lumped into another condition and go down that path. So I would certainly recommend for women who have had a baby to have their thyroid tested regardless after they've had their baby, but certainly those that are in the risk group of developing the condition.
Mm. And does your thyroid function actually change during pregnancy as well? Like, is this process starting earlier than postpartum?
So things happen a lot with pregnancy and the thyroid. Think of it like a stress test for your thyroid when you fall pregnant. And the reason for this is that the first trimester, the baby is 100% dependent on the woman's thyroid. So if there's already an underlying issue there, or even a known issue of thyroid dysfunction, then that can have severe implications for the woman's first trimester of pregnancy. And unfortunately, in some cases, this is where complications such as miscarriage can occur, because the thyroid in the body in general cannot sustain the mother, let alone the baby as well. If the pregnancy does manage to continue, the baby will then start in that second trimester to use its own thyroid to function. And then from about 18 to 20 weeks, the baby will then start to produce its own thyroid hormones. So when you look at that for someone that may have dysfunction, you've got the first potentially 20 weeks where that woman needs to produce enough thyroid hormones for herself and for her baby as well.
Mm. Yeah, okay. So it's under a lot more pressure during that period of time.
Yeah.
And I guess because, your thyroid is dependent on certain nutrients as well. So if there's going to be a funneling of nutrients into the baby, then that's going to be leaving the mother a bit more deficient, possibly. Yeah. And then, like you said, there's that immune involvement too. So I guess that would have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So an important thing to differentiate is the immune system is suppressed during pregnancy to account for the fact that the body is essentially creating something that's foreign. So some people may actually notice if they have a autoimmune condition that their symptoms tend to be a lot better when they're pregnant in some cases, because that immune suppression, that rebound effect after pregnancy, typically from about the 6 weeks, and certainly in postpartum thyroiditis, is what really drives this thyroid inflammation, and it's that rebound of the immune system kicking back in and then going into overdrive. So there really is that the two parts playing in developing this condition, certainly.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about, how some of the symptoms that are very similar to that postpartum period generally for women, like insomnia and fatigue and possibly depression. Are there any other symptoms that women should look out for that might suggest that they have a thyroid issue, possibly during and post-pregnancy?
Yeah, so during can be incredibly difficult when you're just looking at symptoms. And that is because the symptoms are very similar to those that you would experience as a result of being pregnant. So, for example, there can be weight changes, typically weight gain. There can be lack of sleep. There can be irritability, anxiety. There can be mood changes. There can be skin and nail changes, so dry skin, brittle nails. All of those are quite common symptoms in particularly hyperthyroid states, but also they're common symptoms that you get when you're pregnant, right? So diagnosing during pregnancy is most often by blood test, but that usually is monitoring the thyroid to see how it is coping with being pregnant. Certainly after pregnancy, if a woman is in that hyperthyroid state, she's going to experience things like increased heart rate. There could be tremors, heart palpitations, overheating, heat intolerance, insomnia, irritability, anxiety. And then when the condition swings to hyperthyroid, if that does occur, then it goes the other way. So things like fatigue, hair loss, poor memory, constipation, cold intolerance, and depression are some of the main things that you would see.
Okay. So the blood test that we'd be looking at, is that typically your TSH and if that's out of balance, then your T3, T4 and your thyroid antibodies is fairly similar to your standard thyroid tests?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So are there any predisposing factors for developing postpartum thyroiditis?
Yeah, there is. So there's certainly a strong link between having thyroid autoimmunity before pregnancy, so typically the TPO antibodies. Also, if there's a history of thyroid dysfunction previously, and that can even be transient, so it may not even be permanent. If there's been a family history of any thyroid disorders or a previous history of postpartum thyroiditis in another pregnancy, and also other autoimmune disorders, particularly type 1 diabetes. They're at high risk of developing this condition.
Okay. And so it is something that does tend to recur? So like if you've had it one pregnancy, you're likely to get it another time?
Not necessarily. At the moment, it's estimated at about 20% of recurring. So that is some good news, that it doesn't mean that for every pregnancy a woman is necessarily going to continue to have postpartum thyroiditis. It may be one time only, which is good news. As for that 20%, it tends to be women that have very high antithyroid antibodies, where their TSH levels are not in the normal range when they fell pregnant, so certainly above 5, I believe, or even above 10. And that is the most likely risk factor for perhaps having it recur.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I know that you've had a bit of a journey yourself with this. Is it something that you would be able to share your journey with postpartum thyroiditis?
Yes, certainly. So I was aware that I had a pre-existing thyroid condition before I fell pregnant. And I did have some difficulties falling pregnant, and I do believe it was probably due to my thyroid condition. So once I was successful in falling pregnant, I made sure that I monitored my thyroid levels throughout pregnancy, and I wasn't on any thyroid medication either, so it was more to just make sure that my body was handling it appropriately. Thankfully, everything went along really, really well. I had a really wonderful pregnancy, wonderful birth. And then after having my baby, at about 3 months postpartum, I felt generally quite well, but I thought I really need to go and just make sure that my thyroid is functioning as it should. And knowing that I had a previous history, I thought that would be a good idea. As it turned out, I was very hyperthyroid, much to the surprise to myself and my doctor, because I wasn't really presenting with very strong symptoms, which I came to find is relatively common. It's more the hyperthyroid state, if it does swing to that, where it becomes quite known that there may be an issue. So I monitored my bloods every 4 weeks, and I believe after about 2 months I then transitioned into hyperthyroid. And I did then certainly start to notice symptoms. For me, I had extreme fatigue, I would say quite moody, crying without really understanding what I was crying about. I can remember one day I was out walking my dog and it was a beautiful day and I just started crying and I'm like, why on earth am I crying? This is not normal. I don't really understand what's going on. So luckily for me, I knew that it wasn't just as a result of having a baby, and I knew that it wasn't me going crazy and thinking, what's going on. I knew that it was my thyroid driving this, and I think that really helped me in dealing with it appropriately and just letting my body try and regulate itself rather than trying to figure out what was wrong with me in an essence. So I feel quite lucky that I managed to do that. And then I ended up deciding to take thyroxine because I felt as though I was lucky that my symptoms were okay, but I didn't know how bad they could get. And given my history of having a thyroid condition, I thought it best to go that action. And my doctor said, you know what, let's give it a go. And if at a time we feel it appropriate, we can see if we can wean you off it and take it off and see how your body handles. So I really liked that approach, that, we can just try and manage it how we can and then see how my body adapts to it at some point. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey with it so far.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I love how much you were trusting your own body to go through those processes as well.
Yeah, sometimes you've just got to take your hand off the wheel, I think, and just let it do its thing.
Yeah. So did you find that it affects breastfeeding?
I was very fortunate that it didn't affect my milk supply. I was able to breastfeed, and I still am now. My baby will be 1 in 2 weeks. So thankfully I have been able to do that. But it certainly can affect milk production and is a common symptom in women that have thyroid issues. So it certainly can impair that.
Well, hooray for extended breastfeeding. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. I felt a sigh of relief when I knew that that was something that I didn't have to worry about.
Yeah. But it's so interesting the way that it expresses differently in everyone and how there's this different interplay. So it's not just a straightforward thyroid affects prolactin. No, there's other things involved.
Yeah. And you're so right. And this is where really getting to know yourself. I could have easily spent my entire postpartum period not even knowing that I had postpartum thyroiditis. Honestly, I really could have, because you could have just easily put the things I experienced down to having a baby. But it just really presents so differently to everyone, really. Symptoms really do vary.
Yeah, and I do observe quite a lot of the time that it is uncommon to get this thorough testing done, even as a general screening. And sometimes, you can be having done it too early, or you might, because the thyroid changes so much as well, like sometimes you do need to repeat it. The TSH can go up and down, and by itself, it's not always that great an indicator. So you need to get that complete picture of the testing with the antibodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So knowing what you know now, like say theoretically you were to have another bubby, would you do anything to look after your thyroid preconception or during pregnancy to try and prevent this from happening, or how would you advise other women to look after their thyroid to prevent it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because I have looked back and gone, what could I have done? I was really good at having a really great varied diet, a good amount of vegetables, fruits, quality protein, fats. I started taking a really good quality prenatal vitamin 3 months before pregnancy, fish oil, all of that. The one thing that I didn't do that I would be really interested to see how that would go, and that is taking a supplement of selenium. And the reason why I say selenium is there has been some clinical studies done that show some promise in that selenium supplementation during pregnancy, even with women that have positive antibodies, does significantly reduce the risk of postpartum thyroiditis. So I caution that with saying further studies need to be done. And certainly it's not the be-all and end-all that, you take selenium and you'll be fine, but it is quite promising to show that that nutrient did show some improvements in a study that was done, I believe, in 2011. So that's one thing that I didn't do, and I think that's something that I would probably look at doing with my next pregnancy.
That's interesting. And, there's a lot of multivitamins out there that are pregnancy targeted that have virtually, very little selenium in them.
Yeah.
So taking a better quality multivitamin is advisable, or taking some additional selenium, or at the very least, I guess, eating more selenium-rich foods.
Totally.
But that's so hard to do, isn't it? Because selenium's a bit hit and miss in foods.
It is, and it varies so much. And then, of course, you want to, you don't want to just be taking pills all the time, and trying to remember to do that, especially if you've already got children. I'm a big advocate for trying to use food as much as you can rather than relying on supplements. But with pregnancy, there is that increased demand, and if it means that it could possibly help you after pregnancy, then it's something worth looking at if you can.
For sure. And what sort of dosages are you generally looking to work within the range of? Because I know that many people are a bit hesitant to do higher doses of selenium.
Yeah, so the study that I spoke about that showed some promise, the supplementation was at 200 micrograms a day. The upper limit for selenium is often recommended for 150 micrograms per day. I feel quite comfortable that if someone wanted to try that under the useful direction of a qualified nutritionist or naturopath, that 200 micrograms would be suitable, and ensuring that there isn't selenium coming from other sources that might push that too much further over the edge. I think that is a safe way, and actually shown in studies that it may be useful.
Yeah. And, a nutritionist or a naturopath could guide you with that, I guess. And
yeah, absolutely.
Even look at monitoring your levels through your bloods and making sure that they're not going in a pattern that's a bit uncomfortable for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Cool. So are there some other areas that you often look at supporting women with postpartum thyroiditis?
Yeah, look, stress is a huge, huge, huge factor. And I know that gets thrown around a lot. I know, nearly every condition you can think of, you get told, look out for stress, but honestly, it is so big in driving this condition. It's not funny. And it could be so difficult. You've just had a baby and then you've got someone telling you to, just don't stress so much and, look at that. Yeah, right. That's really great. But if there are things that you can try and do, whatever it is, whether it be 5 minutes of meditation just before you go to sleep, or maybe it might be just going out for a walk with your baby, or maybe just catching up with some girlfriends for a coffee once a week, whatever it is, just try and do that whatever it is that kind of makes you feel that you can just let it out, writing things in a journal, or exercising if you can, all of these things really will play a part in trying to reduce that cortisol and that stress that can really be making this condition a lot worse than what it should be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So stress is a really big one.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
Great. Are there any other areas that you often look at?
So nutritionally, we've spoken about selenium. There is also, and I guess when we look back at the pregnancy status is having sufficient iodine to support the thyroid function during pregnancy, and then continuing that for breastfeeding as well. That's really important. And I think it's often a nutrient that does get overlooked when you look at prenatal support. So that's something that really is important. So iodine and selenium for that nutritional. And then for postpartum, when I look at nutrition, I like to try and simplify it and go, you're already trying to reduce your stress. Let's not stress it out anymore by, throwing these hardcore diet things in there. Let's make it really simple. Think of food first. Try and think of getting things as fresh as possible by, going and getting vegetables and fruit, just starting with that, getting some protein sources. Even if you need to buy frozen vegetables and cook that up on a meal, that's perfectly fine. If that's going to save you a trip to the supermarket when you've got other things going on, do that. If you need to keep eggs in the fridge so that you can just do some scrambled eggs for dinner, do that. Try and simplify your nutritional routine. Don't overthink it. Don't try to be this fantastic mum who can just do it all. Just simplify it. As long as you are able to eat well with basics, you'll be fine. You really will.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important for mothers to just eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just so easy to just let that part of your life just drop because, you're worried about the baby and of course, but you got to eat. You
do have to eat. And you know what? When people come to visit you, don't get them to bring gifts of, more baby clothes and things like that. Tell them to bring food. Say, bring me food. That's what I need, So that's the best gift you can give a new mum, I think.
Yeah.
And certainly in the months after, don't forget, they're still trying to raise a little human being there. So.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I always think about iron when it comes to thyroid health as well. Is that something that you look at?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly after giving birth, because women will often lose blood as a result of childbirth. So making sure that iron levels are adequate is really important for the thyroid to function. So yeah, that is a very important nutrient. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and any other areas?
So I guess we've touched a bit on nutritional and then the emotional, the lifestyle side of trying to reduce stress. But I think that emotional support as well, because postpartum thyroiditis is really not known by many people. I think it's really important to be open and honest with those in your family, your support networks. Let them know that, you don't just have the baby blues, that you are going through something and it can be transient at times between your symptoms, and to just get that added support. So that's probably my main take home is look at your emotional support, lifestyle, try and reduce your stress, and nutritionally try and keep it simple by eating the best that you can when you can, and don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you give some women that are having postpartum thyroiditis or worried about it 3 actionable steps that they can do?
Yeah. So I guess further on to what I just mentioned then, first of all, figure out who your support network is. Talk to someone about your condition and how you're feeling, and really get them to help you in whatever that is for you. It may be getting someone to bring you food. It may be someone helping out with the baby. It might be someone to just catch up with for coffee, whatever that is. Number 2, really try and figure out a way that you can reduce stress in your life, as much as that may be a difficult task for you, even if it's just 5 minutes to try and have some time where you just sit there and and write in a journal, read a book, meditate, whatever it is, go for a walk. It's really important. And then third of all, really try and figure out with your nutrition what you can do with minimal stress on yourself. So whether that is meal planning, so planning out your meals for the week and doing one shop. If that works for you, brilliant, do it. If that's going to enable you to eat the best way you can, then do it. If it's cooking a lot of food and freezing it, do that. If it's having frozen vegetables, boiled eggs, nuts in the fridge, things that you are ready to go, because maybe you're not someone that doesn't batch cook, you're not someone that doesn't meal plan, you just eat as you go, have those things ready there for you. So try to simplify it, but stick to foods that are going to give you the most nutrient dense. So, any of your vegetables, fruit, quality protein sources, so eggs, meat, tofu, lovely whole grains. Think of quinoa, think of making some lovely muffins with spelt, buckwheat. All of those kind of things are really going to be helpful for you in that postpartum phase. Make sure you're eating.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, and last question for you. What is your favourite food for thyroid health?
Okay, so this is difficult because there's so many great ones, but I'm going to have to go with the very simple egg. The reason being is it's full of so many wonderful nutrients that are going to support your thyroid. So it does have iodine. It has a lovely amount of really lovely fats, which is going to do wonders for your skin, can do wonders for your hair. Protein as well, that's going to support your immune system. And it's such a versatile food. Boil it up, have it as a snack, scramble it, have it for breakfast, mix in some vegetables, all that kind of thing. So I think I'm going to go with the humble egg.
Nice. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you so much. Now, Renae, do you have any offerings on at the moment?
So at the moment, I'm currently working on a couple of things within my business. So at the moment, I'm looking at putting together a series of helpful, simplified food tips. So that'll be a compilation of videos, how to shop guides, how to cook guides, but simply for your family. I'm hoping to have that finalised within the next 6 to 12 months. And also some ebooks on how to look after your thyroid after having a baby.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that'll be so good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And if people want to know more, how can they get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch with me. My business is Reborn Health. So the most effective way is just send me a message on Facebook, Reborn Health Nutrition. And I'm also on Instagram as well, which is also Reborn Health Nutrition.
Great. And I'll put the links for those in the show notes as well.
Great.
So thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful information today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
It's been great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yay. So thanks everyone for listening. So please hop on and leave us a 5-star review. And if there's anything you want to learn about in the future, don't hesitate to ask. So thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.